Socialism for absolute beginners.
Who could possibly think socialism is a good thing?
Socialism is a cocktail that never should be tried.
No, it's turpentine.
None of those ingredients are good.
The last thing we want in the United States is socialism.
And that's real propaganda, right? That started in the 50s after World War II and the Red Scare and the fight against the Soviet Union, where socialism has ideas in it that should be debated 100%. But yeah, that's just how America has performed, man. And it's so deeply rooted now.
According to a new survey, 70% of American millennials say they'll likely vote socialist, and 1 in 3 of them view communism favorably.
The term socialist has been gaining traction for the past couple of years. There's a good chance...
And especially when they called Bernie Sanders... You guys remember Bernie Sanders? I love Bernie Sanders. I would have voted for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was something different, especially at the Joe Rogan podcast, man. The stuff he talked about. I would have been a big Bernie Sanders guy, man. And what did they do, right? They did the worst scare thing about him, right? Oh, he's a communist. He's a f***ing socialist. He's gonna kill our country. What?
Maybe one of those people even sent you this video. Maybe one of those people even sent you this video.
Oh, now he's trying me to spread the message? I'm spreading communism here, guys.
This video is about what people mean when they call themselves socialists. I'm going to be covering...
Isn't that crazy how fucked America is? So you have like Bernie Sanders. I just watched him at the Joe Rogan podcast some days ago. And he's like, so this is how we could make university free for everyone. And that already is a socialist policy for people. He wants to make university free for all Americans. So everybody can get educated, man. And it's communism. This guy's unbelievable. How dare he, man?
Covering as much ground as possible in as little time as I can to give you a better understanding of a word we hear all the time, but that rarely gets explained all that well. And before we do, I know that at least a chunk of you will be coming in with a negative opinion of socialism, and that's totally fine. Feel free to voice that in the comments or the invisible to you, but very real to me dislike bar. All I ask is that you stick around for a while after you do. Politics is all about disagreement, but to have meaningful disagreements, you need to know what it is you disagree with. Let's get started. The central idea that unites all socialists is...
Let TommyKay try to define socialism real quick. Socialism is the agenda of a society to use its resources to help all members of that society in any way, shape, or form. That's my definition.
For everyone, regardless of who they are. Generally speaking, socialists want people to have the kinds of rights that ensure they have that freedom. The guaranteed right to education, healthcare, food, and shelter. To participate in and constitute democratic bodies. The right to...
Just like Bernie Sanders wanted to make healthcare a human right in the Constitution of America. What a communist! What? How dare he? How dare he?
Leisure. All of these are rights that increase our freedom and the extent to which we can flourish and live a good life. But it's not enough that these rights exist on paper. People need to be able to exercise them. If you have the freedom to an education, but can't afford to spend even 1 hour less on the job to go to class, then you don't really have the freedom to an education. The law says you do, but you're not actually free to enjoy it. Think about it.
Dude, what uni class looks like this? I've been in uni for many years. What class looks like this? This must be economics 101. When I was in uni, nobody looked like this, man.
Like this. We might have missed out on 1,000 Einsteins because poverty kept them from achieving.
Very, very true.
Having freedom and the actual ability to exercise it is critical. And this central concern with freedom isn't very surprising. Every political theory wants to maximize or guarantee freedom in some way. If the US had its own ideology, Americanism or something, its advocates would also say it's all about freedom. And to be fair, capitalism did, after all,
That's a big hypocrisy of the way of life of America and the American dream. America's all about freedom, freedom, freedom. They all use that, especially Republicans. But in the end, their system is just cutting freedom more and more.
The way of life for most people around the world.
Yeah, but when you
at
finally
least
start
in part
streaming,
because
man,
it allowed some people to be more free than they had been before. Because before capitalism, there was something else.
Not
Feudalism.
today. Look at this guy. Feudalism.
Think medieval castles with heaped tables of George R.R. Martin-esque pigs with apples in their mouths and guys with cool names like Torf. Under feudal society, the people who were free made up a tiny group. Kings and other nobles were free. Everyone else lived under their control and generally had very little freedom. After all, nobles owned all the land in their kingdom. So if you weren't a noble, but you wanted a place to live, to not be in total abject poverty, and to have a semblance of security, you were forced into working the noble's land. A pretty sweet deal for the nobility because once you had done all the work, farming and whatnot, they would collect their taxes and force you to give up the products of your labor. Grain, meat, or the money made from trading them with others. But feudalism wouldn't last forever. The emergence of capitalism changed feudal society into something entirely new. Over a couple hundred years, merchants gained more autonomy from feudal lords.
This guy is really content though I can't react much to. Like, you know, I don't like just sitting here and watching like a lazy streamer, but he makes a lot of sense. I can't say much, man. I like that though. Once in a while, I like watching shit like this. Thank you, Chrissy.
And became a whole new class of relatively
How did I join the guild?
people.
You text an
Nobles
officer.
lost a great deal of power both gradually and in violent
Not
revolutions.
really an explanation of feudalism, in my opinion. What's your explanation of feudalism, Vito? Let us all hear it.
And the number of free people grew from just a few hundred nobles to thousands of people who weren't just born into the right family. Capitalism was born. And we can see how this new system works today. Under a capitalist society, your boss is part of this new group of free people. He, like the nobility of the previous economic era, has a lot of freedom to do what he wants, and a lot of the decisions he makes for himself trickle down and ultimately affect you. In the relationship between the two of you, it's ultimately him that has the power. For example, your paycheck...
Yeah, but the worker still has a shit ton of freedom. He's trying to paint this picture of there's no freedom in capitalism. But the worker, like in the West, has so much freedom. Maybe economical freedom, I get that one, sure, but I don't know. Let's go.
Check isn't determined by how good a
Across
job you
Zomboid?
do, but
2
by
weeks.
what your boss decides it to be. He has that freedom. Directly or indirectly, your boss hires and fires who he wants. You work for him and spend your days producing something that he can turn around
But
and
that's not
sell
a
to
bad
someone
thing,
else.
I feel like.
This allows him to make a
that's
profit.
not a bad thing.
Regardless of whether he's a nice guy or not, his
But what do you want? Do you want everyone to be a boss? Do you want everyone to have no boss? That sounds ridiculous.
profit calculation will demand that he take into account a few things, like how much he needs you and how many people out there are gunning for your job. The more those people are desperate, for example because without your job they might end up homeless, the more he can push your wage down. The more homelessness or poverty there is, therefore, the better it is for him. Your salary isn't determined by how dedicated you are or how valuable what you do is, but by how disposable you can be. You can get up and protest him messing with your paycheck like this, but in the back of your mind, you know that if you push back too hard, you risk ending up with everyone else who is fighting to get your job. Under feudalism, people were made to work the nobles' land and hand over the product of their labor. They had no choice and very little freedom to do otherwise. You work the land or you're gonna be in a world of hurt. Now, you need to work the corporate, industrial, or service industry gig and hand over your time and
Dude, where does he always get these, what do you call this? Stock footage, right? These stock videos. Where does he get these videos? And in real life, nobody looks like this. There's no one in the factory looking like this, man.
whatever you produce while you're on the clock to the capitalist. In theory, you have the freedom not to work, or to work for whomever you want, as well as to negotiate with your
Look
employer.
at these hipsters.
But in the
Are they
same way
real?
serfs needed a place to live and food to put on their table, money from employment in the capitalist industry is necessary to live, and it's not like the power is balanced between the two of you. Not long ago, during the dawn of this new economic system, most workers had to hand over the majority of their life, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to their employers, often from a young age and in unspeakable conditions. We only very recently made this somewhat more bearable. The reason we haven't made even more improvements today is that capitalism did not actually represent much of a fundamental change from feudalism. The relationship of domination and coercion isn't all that different.
Left
It's
ship or
just
right
that
ship,
this
Yuzu?
time, the size of the group with freedom is slightly bigger. A couple thousand instead of a couple hundred. And you don't necessarily have to
Left.
be born into it. This system, for all its flaws, hasn't been all bad. In general, living standards have improved under capitalism for a lot of people. Capitalism is a net improvement, in some ways, from the society that preceded it. But just like feudal society became outdated, so too has capitalism. There have always been problems with this narrative of rising living standards, but recently, capitalism has started to fail even the people who once got a decent shake out of it. 2 or 3 generations ago, it was a
Middle class.
no-brainer that a job could get you a house and enough
I agree
money
with
to
him
support a
that,
family.
that capitalism is now getting into its final phase. You and me will not see the final phase. It's gonna take still 100 years, and global warming is knocking it on a doorstep.
Family,
And that's a
pay
big
your way
attribute
through college,
in the end
and
of
get access to
capitalism.
healthcare. You weren't exactly free, but you weren't doing too badly either. That is no longer true. The few people at the top have been given so much freedom to keep the money you made for them by working in their offices, at their storefronts, and in their factories that
He sounds like he wants us to go and get these 1%ers out on the streets and hang them.
isn't much left for you. High
There's-
school and
I think we're
college
all gonna
graduates,
start with a
once
movement here in a second.
guaranteed stable employment and livable wages, are losing out. Nowadays, between 40 and 50% of college grads are unemployed or working in a job that
Fuck
doesn't
off! 41% of recent grads working in jobs not requiring a degree. What? 2020. But there's other attributes to this. For example, that there is now an overly proportionate number of young people that go to university, because we live in a society now where everybody thinks university is the holy grail, whereas blue-collar jobs like working with your hands are getting emptier and emptier.
Indebted at rates that completely overshadow their salaries.
That's ridiculous. I don't get you Americans. You have a young person, the future of your country. They get a degree and they're indebted like $80,000. That sounds like a joke. As a European, what? Today I talked to a Syrian, my barber. He's Syrian. I'm like, oh, where are you from? I'm from Syria. I had to leave. I'm like, because of the war. Yes, the war. When you're 16, Bashar al-Assad, he make you join the army. Dude, it's just like America. If you're a young American, you need to fucking leave. Get to fucking Germany, France, UK. Let the government pay for your degree, bro. You get a degree, you have no debt. Get the fuck out of that country, right?
And the story's the same across the economy. For someone working at Amazon to make as much money as Jeff Bezos does in just 1 year, they would have to work for 58 years. And that's just with his salary. If we start counting dividends, you'd be working every day of every year of multiple lifetimes just to catch up to Bezos' single lap around the sun. Clearly, it's time for an upgrade. Socialists look at this march of...
How can you disagree with that? It seems crystal clear to me that certain people having 40 fucking billion in a bank account just doesn't seem very appropriate, man.
1, is there a better way to get the same results as produced under capitalism? And 2, what is it? In other words, how do we keep the parts we like from capitalism, rising living standards, and cut out the parts we don't like, the exploitation, imbalances of power, and massively uneven distribution of those rising living standards?
These fucking
The
stock
big
videos,
answer
man.
for
What the
socialists
fuck?
lies in who owns things like companies. The argument goes that so long as there is just one, or at the most a few people who own our society's productive enterprises, they will be able to make decisions that benefit them and not us. Your boss, because he has been given the freedom to do so, will use his power to curtail yours. He will always try to push your wages down as low as possible, make you work the longest hours you can, make your working conditions as dire as possible, because it's cheaper that way and rakes in more money for him and the other people who own the company. While he has to balance that with what other capitalists will do and try to offer better conditions, hours, or wages, every step he makes in the right direction has to contend with his profit margins. If something is unprofitable, even just by a fraction of a % less,
These stock videos. I can't get all these stock videos, man.
do it.
They
He
always
can't
try
risk
to be
some
so
other
diverse.
company being more
How do you fucking change that, man?
ruthless than he is and undercutting his business. The only choices that are on the table are the ones that make him wealthier, even if that means making you poorer or generally worse off in the process.
I also think he's always very harsh with what he says. He's talking like this is everywhere in the world. I think a lot of people love their jobs, have good bosses, have fair conditions. I think he's sometimes trying to paint the picture a bit too black and dark to help his narrative. He's a very educated fucking guy, that's for sure, man. He's very sick content.
Socialists take stock of all these incentives and try to understand how we can change them. Instead of the most important thing being the capitalist profit, how can we incentivize things that benefit all of us, putting more options on the table than just the ones that make the guy at the top richer? And we have a lot of ideas on how we can do this, from central planning, to free association between communes, to worker-owned cooperatives, to cybernetic management.
Okay, once again, I want
to...
He's now, for the first time since I watched him, stating solutions.
And we have a lot of ideas on how we can do this, from...
What does central planning means? A government makes a plan for what should happen, right? Central planning allows the government to marshal society's resources for goals that might not be achieved by market force alone. Central planning is commonly associated with socialist and communist forms of government. Other countries might resort to central planning in times of war or national emergency. That's when the government says we need to build this and that. What I was saying some weeks ago, that I'm reading a book right now that says that central planning is the only way to help global warming. Global warming will never stop as long as capitalism reigns free, because they want profit. They don't give a shit about anything. It doesn't matter to them. Only under central planning you can really fix global warming. Because under central planning, you were like, the government says, from now on, only electric cars, something like that. Central planning is going to be a thing in the future, 100%.
From central planning, to free association between communes, to worker-owned cooperatives, to cybernetic management.
Work-around cooperatives, or worker-owned cooperatives. The two central characteristics of a worker cooperatives are workers own the business, and they participate in its financial success on the basis of their labor contribution to the cooperative. TommyKay is a worker-owned cooperative. My editors at Marconi and Tony, they get a percentage payout, which I think is a great system. I love that. My workers, the people that work for me, they don't get money per month. They get a percentage of the income they make. The thing is, how would you ever do that in real life, man? I'm fucking completely lost now. He says all these solutions, I have no idea what they mean. And if I don't get that, how is a basic Joe gonna get that? Communist
However
robots?
varied these ideas are, and truly there are a lot of them, they are all united by the same conclusion. That the best way to figure out which ideas benefit everybody to the fullest extent is to let people decide for themselves.
AI managers to
give
remove the
everybody
guy at the top.
control over what ideas we want to see
Well,
happen.
I always
and
say I
how.
want AI overlords.
Instead
I
of
agree
a
with
few
that.
people at the top setting the rules of the game, everybody should get a say over things like their working conditions. Control over what gets done and how, for everyone, by everyone. Not by some self-appointed class of millionaires and billionaires who get to boss everyone else around. And you intuitively know that this works. How many times has your boss made a decision you know is in the wrong, but you're the one who has to live with it? How many times have you been told that there's just not enough in the budget for a raise, or for you to take that day off, but the company is raking in record profits? How many decisions are kept behind closed doors until they blow
I like where this is going. It goes where what I was talking about. I think the human race needs AI overlords, because AI is not going to be greedy and fucked up
in your
like humans.
face?
Yeah.
You
I
might
agree
not
with this.
always have the answers to every problem your company faces, but if the solutions of those at the top are so good, why are their decisions made behind closed doors? Why do they always make them better off and not you? Socialists understand that this isn't a system that makes anybody more free or makes things any more fair. Freedom is a two-way street. I can't be free to do what I want if you have the freedom to stop me from doing it. I can't be free if you make all my decisions for me. By all means, when something
when I turn on
only
sub
affects
mode.
you should be able to do what you please. But if things like my livelihood get involved, it's only fair that we all get a say. And it's becoming clearer to more people growing up today that their odds of living a decent life aren't as secure as they have been in the past. It's going to come down to a lot of luck whether you end up doing well for yourself and living what we might consider a normal life, even if
I agree
you
with
work
that.
really
It has
hard.
changed a lot.
But
You can be a very genius young person, man, with great ideas and good work ethics. There's still a very big...
even though we see how our
portion
current
of luck
capitalist
involved.
society is leading us down this unfortunate path, curtailing our freedom, or more generally, how the system benefits from things like high unemployment, poverty, and low
I like how in America, this is considered a ghetto. Like, this is considered a bad neighborhood. What? In Germany, if you have a house like this, you're fucking rich, man. This thing in Leipzig, man, $300,000.
wages, it can feel scary or even
Like,
just
this is supposed to
hasty
scare me?
jump to
This is amazing.
socialism for the answer. We can recognize the flawed
The fuck?
incentives and inherent economic instability of capitalism
In
and
East
still
Germany.
not know what to do about it. The historical record, after all, hasn't really proved that an alternative system works either. At least, that's what we've been told. But contrary to what is commonly believed, the performance of developing countries in the period of state-led development was superior to what they've achieved during the subsequent period of market-oriented reform.
What? Yeah, I feel like I'm too dumb for this. I feel like I'm in uni.
There were
All these big words.
are
What?
some spectacular failures of state intervention, but most of these countries grew much faster, with more equitable income distribution and far fewer
He's talking about countries where the government sometimes intervened. They did better.
economic crises during the bad old days than they have done in the period of market-oriented reforms. Moreover, it is also not true that almost all rich countries have become rich through free market policies. The truth is more or less the opposite. With only a few exceptions, all of today's rich countries, including Britain and the US, the supposed homes of free trade and free market, have become rich through the combinations of protectionism, subsidies, and other policies that today they advise developing countries not to adopt. Free market policies have made few countries rich so far and will make few rich in the future. That's a quote from economist Ha-Joon
Which
Chang
makes sense.
in his book 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism. There's more interesting stuff in there, and it's a pretty casual read if you're...
It's very interesting to me how I see that among my peers and among chat, etc. Over the last years, growingly, the resentment against capitalism is growing a lot, and no one can deny that. It's growing and growing and growing.
And he's not
Which
even a
totally makes
socialist,
sense.
so you don't have to
I
worry
mean,
about
I'm also
consuming
not
commie
pro-capitalism
propaganda or
anymore.
anything. He's just honest about
How
the
can you
shortcomings
be?
of capitalism. So what does this mean? Is socialism just when the government does stuff? The answer is no. For starters, that question implies a lot of...
Also, what he's unfortunately doing here is that he's using the government as a fictional entity here, without the human factor. But if you look at governments, they will never be fair. They will never distribute it fair. Socialist past governments, right? Venezuela, fucking Russia, etc. The government that he likes to describe here as the savior is unfortunately often not the savior because there's a human factor of power, hungriness, and greed.
really horrible things.
What government
you
will
think
ever
the
be like
DMV
this?
sucks? Just wait until the government takes over everything else. You think the government is screwing you now? Just wait until they have even more power. Obviously, a world of DMVs as dictators isn't what socialists want. Who in their right mind would defend something like that? What counts as the government doing stuff? Sometimes government programs are measures for wealth redistribution, like Social Security, welfare, public libraries, and food stamps. Other times, it's basic stuff that every government, regardless
I stand by the Nordic model as the best of both worlds. And I think what Bokwan is saying here is it's factually proven. I like facts, I like data, and it's pretty obvious that Scandinavia is doing very, very fucking well compared to others, man. And what they do is they have socialist policies, social welfare plans. If you're unemployed, like Bokwan, you got like 1,000 euros or something while at university. You have. If you're unemployed, you get help, man. There's great benefits for elderly people, etc., etc., etc. Sweden is not doing good. What do you know about Sweden? All you know about Sweden is a Reddit post that says that everybody is a Muslim stabbing everyone. That's what you know about Sweden. Please elaborate how Sweden is not doing good, SKK. I would like to hear.
Of its economic model or ideology.
Swedistan.
Things like fire.
If you're a young lad in Sweden, you're much, much more capable, free to do what you want in this society than in fucking America. You will go to uni, and you will leave uni with a degree, and you're not in massive debt. You can even have a fucking heart disease, and you're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fucking fine. What is your arguments?
Garbage
shows me I
removal,
should never react to
sewers,
these
or
videos.
streetlights. In this list are also institutions like the police, the military, the FBI and CIA, courts, and prisons. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, there are going to be things on this list that you don't like and other things that you do. When you imply that socialism is when the government does stuff, and you're already primed to be wary of the word, your mind easily jumps to whatever thing the government does that you don't like, or that the present government does the worst, hence the DMV and authoritarian stuff. But regardless, that's not what socialism is. Socialism is a society in which the means of production, factories, farms, offices, basically the things that produce for the economy, are held by all in common and subject to democratic decision-making, rather than that of a few individuals.
My problem with videos like this all sounds great, but it will never really happen. This is never gonna be real.
While governments are one way to coordinate this ownership, it's not the only one. What's more, there's a deeper problem with this question. The way we think of government
should have happened,
isn't
but it's not going to happen again because capitalism has now created a lot of mechanisms to make sure it doesn't happen again.
As humans, we have
especially the internet and social media is helping them a lot.
Hard time imagining a world that isn't like the one we have now, which means we also have a hard time imagining how our governments could be different from the way they exist today under capitalism. And you already know what that's like. Companies pumping in billions to get some guy elected and in their pocket. Public services working on razor-thin budgets and being genuinely infuriating. The people you cast a ballot for not doing their jobs and getting paid quite a lot to pretend it's not their fault. Every election going to the lesser evil. The default vision of
every election going to the lesser evil. You cannot describe American politics any better.
Government we all inherit is one of incompetence, unresponsiveness, corruption, and elitism. It benefits a select class of 1%ers and only
But he's thinking elitism and corruption wouldn't happen in the social society?
A few crumbs to the rest of us. The main promise that socialists have to keep is that we can turn this all on its head. That we can truly arrive at democracy, one that isn't awful and out of touch.
I saw a thing on 9gag from Fox News or some shit where they project in polls that DeSantis will beat Biden.
By directly involving people in the democratic process.
But dude, if I was so fucked. America is the most fucked up state ever. Imagine you're an American, a normal guy. You can vote the old man who's senile, who likes to sniff girls, or you fucking vote for the guy who's like, abortion should be banned and shit, man. Like the fucking DeSantis crazy fucker, man.
Their job
what the fuck is your
all
country?
The power away from the billionaires that sit at the helm of massive corporations with the power to lobby democracy away. That we can coordinate, through planning or otherwise, the production of things in such a way that we are producing according to our needs and desires, not for the profit of a select few. Profit-driven markets sometimes get this right, in all fairness, broken clock and all that, but are still very often terrible at delivering on our wants and needs. Hence why housing is so unaffordable for most people, why homelessness is always so high, why education is out of reach for millions, and why healthcare costs continue to skyrocket. The demand is there. Capitalism is terrible at providing the supply. The mission set out by socialists is to deliver on the promises of capitalism that capitalism can't actually provide. To give you and your loved ones the security, the stability, and the good life that you deserve, and that is within our means to provide to all, were it not for a few leeches taking advantage of their undue power and getting in the way.
He's always very hateful towards the top 1%. Like the way his rhetoric, the way he talks, he fucking wants to take them down,
of everyone
bro.
getting a livable baseline to build upon. In short, no. Socialism is not when the government does stuff. You get to decide what gets done. You participate
I don't know if that's good though. If I learned one thing in life is that all humans are fucking retards, man. He wants the people to decide everything.
directly than
I don't know
before
about that.
in the decisions that
I know
affect
about
your
that.
day-to-day life.
52% of Britain voted for Brexit. I'm personally a guy, I don't know if direct democracy is so good. Letting people decide everything, I don't fucking know.
Socialists
People are
aren't
fucking
against
retarded as
competition.
hell, man.
We're also
Wealth redistribution through progressive taxation is the best way to create a better society. I fully agree with you, but you can't get the Americans on board for that one. Having the government provide so much everyone has access so unbelievably based.
big fans of
I fully
innovation,
agree with you,
but we don't want
Yeah.
to see competition and innovation.
The one thing you just have to do to fix the world a little bit is, if this is society like, let's say Germany, this is 1%, and this is the 99%, and this is all money in Germany, right? Then it's kind of like this, I guess. Like, it's super unproportionate. And the number one thing you would have to do is to make it go here again. And every time a party proposes this, like the Green Party in Germany, the big bad Green Party that's every day on the front cover of Bild Zeitung, so evil. They're trying to take our lifestyle. Every time they say there should be an inheritance tax, oh no, the Green Party, oh, they're so evil.
Being used as excuses to push most people towards poverty and make the lucky remaining
They
few
took a jab.
ludicrously wealthy. Still, this all sounds well and good in theory, but socialism doesn't work in practice, right? And here we have to pause for a second and understand that socialism, like capitalism, exists on a
if you're making 2 million euros a year, you should obviously pay a lot more than the guy making 25,000. Yeah, fully agree. As I'm in that thing now, I don't like it. Like, I'm the highest tax bracket at the moment. I don't like that, and I kind of understand the capitalists. I understand them. Bro, why do I have to give away half? Fuck that. I'm going to the Cayman Islands. I get that, you know? And also there's this problem, Boko, and here's this problem I see. If you create a society, for example, like Germany, that is doing this, massive taxation of rich people, for example, 52% for the very rich, what's going to happen is that rich people just leave. If you're a big company, you just fucking leave Germany. Germany doesn't have any patents. Germany doesn't have any big $1 billion income mergers other than Zalando and I think Deliveroo or some shit. And if you're a young guy with a great idea and a great company in Germany, you're fucking leaving. You're going to a lower tax country. That's a problem with shit like this.
Continuum of policies and ideas. There is no fully capitalist experiment, just like there is no fully socialist experiment.
That's happening everywhere, but it's not
saying
gonna happen.
socialism doesn't work is as wrong-headed as saying capitalism doesn't work. More generally, though, it's not like there's a good experimental method to base that conclusion off of. It's not like we can take two countries, control for all their differences, and let them run loose with each economic model. No two countries are the same, start off from the same point, or exist in a vacuum. We can't compare country A to country B and call it a day. Socialist experiments often happened in countries that were poorer to start off with, and generally speaking had to contend with a global economy managed by capitalist adversaries. If this were a scientific experiment, it wouldn't get published. That being said, we can look to the archives of countries that have experimented with mostly socialist economics and see how successful they were, despite the circumstances. One place we might look is Salvador Allende's socialist Chile. Allende was a socialist who won the Chilean presidential election of 1970. In his few short years as president, and we'll get to why they were so short in just a minute, Allende brought incredible
I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'm predicting that a CIA agent is going to make sure that guy gets fucked up.
changes to Chilean society. He raised wages. Real wages increased by around 22% in the first full year of his presidency. He lowered taxes. 35% of Chileans were no longer taxed at all. He reined in inflation, lowering it by over 10 points. He funded massive housing programs, building tens of thousands of affordable homes all across the country. Education also got a big boost, and enrollment at all educational levels grew. Universities in particular were made free, increasing enrollment by nearly 90%. Hospitals and other medical centers were opened across the country, particularly in underserved, rural, and poor areas.
But then he invaded Poland.
Allende extended maternity leave, doubling it from 6 to 12 weeks. Chile saw a dramatic decrease in poverty, and generally speaking, more people could more fully enjoy.
I mean, I think no one in Czech can even deny that. If you will have the power, let's say you're God and you have all the power, you can fuck everyone up, and you will force the entire world to be more socialist, obviously the world would massively improve. No one could deny that. If you will distribute all the resources and wealth to the people obviously will improve. Unfortunately, we don't live in that fictional world with a god doing that and shit.
Their
That's
lives.
the problem.
And interestingly enough, the bulk of this new
Chile
economy
had
was
weapons of mass
organized through Project
destruction.
CyberSign, a decentralized network of computers that would take anonymous, self-reported, and voluntary updates from workers in
What the
productive
fuck?
enterprises across Chile to
They were
identify
playing
areas where
Cyberpunk?
resources needed to be redirected. The democratic economy in Chile was highly responsive to fluctuating changes, and Chileans reaped the rewards. GDP grew 7% in the first year, production by 13%, and consumption by 11%.
Where do you get the money? Right there. It makes production go up and shit.
For more people, it worked
He's
better.
gonna totally
period.
get headshotted, man. Let's be real.
This kind of response
He's
wasn't
fucking dead.
welcomed by everyone, though. Allow me to pull quotes from a particular document, the Church Commission Report on Chile, one of the only documents released by the American government to the public about the extent of its intelligence agency's intervention in a foreign country. These are all things the US is actually admitting to. Covert American activity was a factor in almost every major election in Chile in the decade between 1963 and 1973. In several instances, the United States intervention was massive. The 1964 presidential election was the most prominent example of a large-scale election project. The Central Intelligence Agency spent more than $2.6 million, $24 million in today's dollars, in support of the election of the opposition. More than half of the Christian Democratic candidate's campaign was financed by the United States. The most
The thing is, when I hear stuff like this, it's like, we all know this, right? It's nothing new. We all know this, but we kind of just forget about it and just put it away because it's just too fucked up to think about.
extensive covert action activity in Chile was propaganda. It was relatively cheap. In addition to buying propaganda piecemeal, the station often purchased it wholesale by subsidizing Chilean media organizations friendly to the United States. The CIA supported or even founded friendly media outlets which might not have existed in the absence of agency support. The United States' covert efforts to affect the course of Chilean politics reached a peak in 1970. The CIA was directed to undertake an effort to promote a military coup in Chile to prevent the accession to power of Salvador Allende. In summary, the White House, intelligence community, multinational corporations, and military wasted millions trying to stop a popular candidate getting elected in a democratic election, and when it failed, wasted another set of millions trying to depose the guy who had improved Chile by nearly every metric. Their first coup attempt in 1970 would fail, but 3 years later, the US efforts would succeed. Allende was ousted as president, opting to take his own life rather than be captured when the Chilean army, hopped up on CIA money, took over the presidential building. What followed was a new era of American puppet government that imprisoned, tortured, and killed hundreds of thousands of people. And Allende's story isn't particularly unique. There are echoes of this story all around the world, everywhere socialist alternatives started doing a little too well. We don't have a magic button to rewind the clock and try this again. We can't for sure know if things would have happened differently if by some accident of history, socialism had become our global economic model all those years ago when capitalism was born. But we can still try to imagine what we can do from this point forward. There's no doubt that this video won't have answered all your questions. Imagining a different world is a tedious thing to do, and there are a lot of concerns to be addressed. And it's also usually easier to ask questions about something in the future than turn around and ask those same questions about the system we have right now. If we were as critical with our present society as we are with that of the future, would we still choose it? In any case, I've put a link below to a short pamphlet put together by Verso and Jacobin magazine. Most questions people have when first encountering socialist theory are answered in a few short conversational pages. There's answers to questions about human nature, property, authoritarianism, laziness, and other things that are typically concerning, answered in a fair way by people who believe in a socialist future. I'm one of those people who believes—
This guy makes sick content, man. That's some fucking sick shit, man.
What are you still doing here, mate? Jeez! Well, if you want to see more, click these videos. Have fun. Looking good, boy.